him here on Skype. Dr. Robert E. Farrell received his Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Ohio State University, his MBA from Western New England College, and his Doctor of Engineering from the University of Massachusetts. For nearly 20 years, Dr. Farrell worked in his plastics industry, designing industrial machines for which he holds 6 patents. 16 years ago, Dr. Farrell gave up his position as vice president to become a professor at Penn State University, where he helped start a plastics engineering technology program. Today, that program is recognized as one of the best in the country. He recently retired from Penn State University as associate professor. For most of his life, Dr. Farrell has been interested in ufology. Over 10 years ago, he began doing serious research for his novel, Alien Log. His book is unique in that it offers readers a nuts and bolts approach encompassing many aspects of ufology. And as I said, I've got to get him here on Skype. So give me a moment to do that. Let's see. What? Oh, okay. Autumn's whispering to me here. Hold on a second. And that would be it. Okay, I got it. So let's add him to, no, not that button, this button. Oh, all right. Working on it now, folks. Robert, is that you?
Oh, that's me. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir, I can. Welcome back to Late Night in the Midlands.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you back. So what's new? What you been working on?
Well, I'm still working on my 3rd novel, the Alien Log series. It deals with the underground Dulce base, which you may be familiar with.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, you've been researching that. This goes right into what I was just talking about, kind of. We've got some out there who are claiming that's a reptilian base, alien base. What do we know about this this underground base?
Well, I've heard that. That there are reptilians down there. There are grays, different types of grays. But I guess I really am not sure. I'm still working on that part.
I see. Okay. Well, fair enough. But some say that it's definite, and, I would actually like to see some proof of that. I don't doubt that aliens are visiting us. I don't doubt that they're here with us. But when I hear about these shapeshifters and these reptilians, and, I would wonder if they really had an agenda and they wanted to take over the world, why wouldn't they just do it? Why play games with politics and all that stuff? Why not just come and wipe us out? Because they could, right?
They could. I'm sure they have the technology to do that. And my conclusion is that there is a race of aliens here that are basically protectors or overseers, guardian angels, whatever you want to call them. And that I think there must be some sort of galactic federation rules in play here that prohibit other groups from kind of taking over.
I see. Well,
yeah.
I guess that does make some sense. And, I know there's enough evidence. I have no doubt that aliens, ETs, whatever you want to call them, they exist. I've seen UFOs myself, so I know those exist.
Right.
But what they're doing, that's the big question, I guess.
Well, you like to think that they are spiritually advanced as much as they are technologically advanced, and also that they're wise. And if they are wise, I think they realize the importance of diversity, which is maybe why there is this so-called galactic rule that says that you can look but don't touch. In other words, if you were an anthropologist and you were going to study a group of the natives in the jungle, you don't interact with them because you would contaminate their society, basically. And I think that may be the case, that they're standing back, letting us develop on our own, because we are a species of our own, and because it is important to have diversity throughout the universe. If all life were grays, simply grays or whatever alien form there is, if it was all like that, that would be very dangerous for the survival of life in general. So diversity is important. I think they realize that. So I think they take their stance is that they stand back. You know, they just let us develop, and hopefully we don't destroy ourselves. And because there are probably thousands of alien species that kind of wander by from time to time, maybe take a look-see. The rule is go ahead and look, but don't interact. Just stand back. Now, supposedly in Dulce Base, there have been, since probably World War II, we have been, the military, a faction of the military anyway, has been working with the aliens in exchange for their technology, allowing them to kind of do some of their own research in the form of genetics manipulation. And in my story, which of course is fiction, my characters are going to go in and try and halt some of the things that are being done that have gotten out of hand now, as far as what they're doing to humans.
Right, and if you could explain to everybody why you made them fiction, because wasn't it because you said that if you put the truth out there, people are less likely to pick it up? Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I have felt since I retired, I felt compelled that my job now is to try and educate the masses, so to speak. And a lot of the audience that I'm going after are people who would not go into the New Age section of Barnes & Noble, for instance, but they would pick up a science fiction book. So I am trying to educate them in an entertaining way, a non-threatening way, and a way that they wouldn't be ashamed to have a book laying on the table that talks about alien log, the science fiction book. But they may not want to show people the fact that they've got a book that says this is how UFOs work or whatever.
Right.
So I think that science fiction is a better way to educate the people. With maybe they don't even realize they're being educated as they're reading my books, but I think they are. But it's entertaining, so they're going to read it.
And that's the best way to educate some. Sometimes I'll do it through these funny little songs that I'll make up and stuff and put them out there, because some people are more apt to grab a hold of that and learn rather than hear you come right out and tell them the truth. Some people can't handle it. And, and I wouldn't say UFOs and UFO technology is really new age either. I mean, this is something that goes back since the beginning of time.
Yes. Before we were here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about alien log, and maybe as you go through some of it, maybe you could tell us the true end of it and what you found in your research.
Well, the alien log was the title of the first book of the series called Alien Log, mm-hmm. And I chose an artifact. It was fictitious, but I chose to wrap my story around an alien artifact. And so the story goes that during right after the UFO crash in Kingman, Arizona, back in May of 1953, there was a captain who was overseeing the crash, and he discovered this artifact next to the craft. Now that's fiction, and he didn't know what the artifact was. Today, you might have called it a Palm Pilot or something like that, but back in '53, they didn't have such a thing. So he thought it was either some kind of a communicating device or perhaps an electronic version of the log of the ship, which is where the title Alien Log came from. Well, he hides it on his person because he feels it's more important than the craft itself, so he doesn't want to throw it on the pile and send it back to some secret base. He keeps it. And then we jump ahead to present time, and he is a retired general. He's dying of cancer, and of course he's been following the UFO, seeing all of his life. So he's becoming alarmed because people who have been abducted under hypnosis reveal that the aliens had said that they're about to make their presence known, and it would be in their lifetime. And these people, a lot of them have gray hair, so it appeared to be something that was going to be imminent. And so the general now, he's the general, is very alarmed about this, so he takes the artifact to the President of the United States and gives it up to the President, who is equally alarmed and sees this as possibly a threat not only to our national security, but to all of humanity. So the President commissions a colonel to put together a team of scientists to try and get the device activated and translated to find out what's going on and maybe sort of head them off at the pass, so to speak. So in my story, there are basically three characters. There's the colonel in charge of the scientific team, and then there are two scientists. And my lead character actually is a young woman in her 30s who's a linguist, and she's world-renowned for her ability to translate anything that's written. For her, it's intuitive. She doesn't know herself how she does it sometimes. But she's tapped for the project and agrees to go along, and then she's taken to a secret underground base out in Nevada where she's paired with a young astrophysicist who has a passion for UFOs. As a matter of fact, he works for a company called Gravidyne, located near Boston, and where they're doing research to try and create gravitational propulsion. But he has a passion for UFOs and a lot of knowledge, so he's brought in to the team. Again, he doesn't realize where he's been taken. Eventually, they figure out that they're out in Area 51. But anyway, his part of the team is to try is to do a technical interpretation of whatever Wendy, the linguist, happens to discover. So in the first book, this team is sequestered in this underground base in Nevada, and my characters are given a tour of the base where they see some broken UFOs and some alien bodies. And this is all important for Wendy, the linguist, to try and get a feel for the writing that she's going to encounter and basically, their lifestyle and whatever. They actually climb aboard one of the broken UFOs, and she gets a chance to see what it looks like and some of the writings that are on the control panel. And but in the story, she eventually gets the device activated. And through serendipity, I don't want to spoil the story, but she sort of accidentally gets it activated. And so she actually accomplishes her mission of activating the device, and through another method, which I don't want to get into, she does learn what the aliens are up to. And so they're just about to use this device to try and tap into the mainframe, if you would, of the aliens and maybe suck out some of their technology, when lo and behold, the artifact is stolen. And so at the end of the first book, there's a chase scene into the desert, and they eventually recover the device, and they're ready to head back to the base and resume the project. Then the second book, Alien Log 2, picks up right there in the desert, and they head back to the base. And some strange things happen along the way. During the trip, Corey, the astrophysicist, is accidentally abducted and taken aboard a UFO. And then that UFO takes him to a secret rendezvous place on the other side of the moon, which is where the mothership is. And his captor, Quellen, greets him and apologizes for the mistake and gives him a tour of the questions that he might have. Hello?
Yeah, we're here.
Oh, okay. I heard a beep. I didn't know. And so he answers any question that Corey has, because he can kind of erase his memory before he lets him go. And in the second book, then I can get into some pretty heady issues. Corey, for instance, wants to know why they're abducting people and creating hybrids. And Quellen says, well, we're creating hybrids because they will be used to usher in the New World Order. And of course, Corey says, well, what's the New World Order? And Quellen begins to explain how the world government will be. And I go into detail on that. And kind of I have to say, I wish we had it right now, especially after this last election. But in the New World Order, of course it's a world government, but you could apply the same thing to the United States government, where all the elected officials serve a single term, a single 4-year term, and the equivalent to what we would call the House of Representatives are members of to serve 4 years, but they're chosen by a lottery system from their district. Every election period, a certain number of names are drawn at random. It's kind of like the old draft system for the military. Names are drawn at random. A number of people receive a letter in the mail about 2 months before the election saying, "Congratulations, you've been selected to run for Congress. You have 1 month to appeal." And then after the appeal process, the people who survive, if you want to call it that, are given public funds, and there's a publicly funded election campaign. Basically, they can run. It lasts for a month. It's very tightly controlled. It doesn't get out of hand like a recent election process where they spent $1 billion. After the election, then the winner, who wins for that district, is then sent to Washington, D.C., or to the world government, in the case of my story, but would be sent to Washington, D.C. For 2 weeks of orientation, and then they would return home where they stay. Because the technology is available that they don't really need to stay in Washington. They can communicate, they can teleconference, and do all the things they have to. They stay with their constituents, and so that's the House of Representatives. If they choose after serving in the House, they think, well, geez, I really did enjoy that. I like being a public servant. I'd like to become a senator. They throw their hat in the ring, and again, at random, all the hats are looked at, and a few are drawn out of the pile at random and are selected to run for the Senate. And again, it's a publicly financed campaign, and after they're elected, they go to Washington for 2 weeks for orientation, and then they return home to their state where they stay. And no need to spend their whole day in Washington. They can have maybe an annual get-together in Washington for whatever reason. But they stay home and they represent their people. They're close to their constituents. As far as lobbyists, the lobbyists are allowed, but they can only do a dog and pony show, and it has to be a public show. And it'd be illegal for them to financially benefit any elected official. Now, after they've served in the Senate, if they want to continue on, they can throw their hat in the ring for presidency, and it's a similar process. But in that case, 2 people are selected, one a president and the other vice president. And they indeed would spend their 4-year term in Washington or wherever the world capital would be. But that's the New World Order. And I see it as not being any threatening situation. It's still elected officials. And as far as the economic environment and everything else, it's pretty much as we would have it now. There's no intent to take over, so to speak. The intent is to let us run things the way they should be run.
Yeah, and that's like anything. I think in a perfect world that might be okay, but with the corruption that we have, having just the United States order is enough for me. I mean, if we had a one world government, we'd really be in some hot water. And really, I think that we already do in a sense. I think that one world government's coming together as we speak, and especially with the election of Obama. I mean, it's like the people in America just laid down and don't care anymore. I mean, I guess you can step on the Constitution all you want, and people will still root for you, which is a shame. But I don't know. Again, I think in a perfect world, maybe a one world government where everybody comes together would be a great thing. Unfortunately, we have too many crooked, evil people in high places that would just use that so much to their advantage, and that's what I worry about.
Well, that's the purpose of the hybrids. The hybrids are a little different than you and I. They are not self-centered. They actually have the good of the people, or the good of the country, or the good of the world in mind, not the good of themselves. That's just the way they are, and that's why they would use hybrids to bring in this new world order. And the hybrids could be here right now. I mean, they could be some person across the street that you think is perfectly normal, who, by the way, doesn't even realize they're a hybrid. But when the time comes, they would be activated. Just as in my story, the base commander was a hybrid. He didn't even know it. But when it came time to steal back the artifact, he was abducted and made to realize who he really was, and told what his mission was, and returned to the base and performed his mission.
Okay, now how much of this was actually, because this is actually scary if there's truth to this, so, I mean, how much of this was actually research that led you down these type of paths?
How much of the hybrid stuff?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of my information on hybrids I got from various books I read. David Jacobs has written about abductions and several books where he's actually presented case studies, if you would, just like the late Dr. John Mack. In his book, he presented like 22 case studies of people who have been abducted. But David Jacobs, in one of his books called The Threat, goes through the whole process of the development of a hybrid, from step one, stage 1 to stage 2, and so forth, where in stage 1, a female would be abducted, and during the abduction, an egg would be removed and fertilized, and with genetically manipulated material, and she would then be taken back to her bed, if you would, and she'd wake up the next day not realizing that she had been abducted. Excuse me. And so she would know, but she finds out after a while that she's pregnant. She doesn't know how she got pregnant, but she's pregnant. Then, before maybe the third trimester, she's abducted again, and the fetus is taken. Excuse me. And then she's returned, and she wakes up and she's not pregnant. The fetus, meanwhile, is taken into growing tanks and brought full term on the ship, and is a first stage hybrid, very alien-like, could not survive in this atmosphere, could not survive in this planet, and looks very much like a gray, with some human characteristics. Well, genetic material from that first stage would be used for the next step, where again a female's abducted and the egg is fertilized with genetic material that now contains, one step closer to a human, and the process is repeated maybe 4 or 5 times until finally the hybrid is almost virtually human. And in fact, I don't know if David Jacobs said this, but I visualized that at that stage, the child is allowed to go full term, and the baby is born into a family who they just don't suspect anything. To them, it's natural, and even the child doesn't realize that it's a hybrid. But the child has certain abilities, maybe some psychic abilities, and maybe a certain personality, and that might distinguish that child from the normal child. The child might be very brilliant, high IQ and all that stuff, but not realize it's a hybrid. The parents don't realize it's a hybrid, just think it's exceptional. That child might go on to become a senator or some other high position because of their skills. When the time comes, that child, that person then, just as in my story, would be perhaps abducted, reminded of their background, and then told what their mission is. So, to answer your question, I guess I got a lot of that information from books like written by David Jacobs or Bud Hopkins or John Mack would be my 3 primary sources.
I see, but have you ever tried to get any, I know it's a shot in the dark, but freedom of information, documentation or anything like that? Or do these books, I haven't read these books, maybe they provide something like that?
I have not tried to get anything from the government through freedom of information. My impression is, based on what Stan Friedman says all the time, is what you end up with is something that's so redacted that it's almost useless. So I guess I don't waste my time. It takes a lot of effort to get anything.
It does.
And my understanding is you have to be pretty specific when you make a request. So you really have to know beforehand what you're going after. And I frankly don't want to spend the time doing that. I'll let other people work on that.
I did it once. Spent a few days sending stuff out, trying to get some information on something, and I was denied left and right. Yeah, and it's information that's supposed to be available for us, but and when you do get it, like you said, it's so everything's blacked out. And, they make sure that the important stuff can't be read, so it really does almost become a waste of time in most cases. Robert, hang on with us for a moment. We're going to take our break, and then we'll come back.
Barnes and Noble or Amazon, to their sites and order the books or download the ebooks. Every book I have is available as an ebook for those that want instant gratification. It is an inexpensive and quick way to get a hold of the books. So
okay. All right, great.
It's pretty simple, actually.
Yeah. So, these UFOs, where do you think they're coming from? I mean, we hear a lot about bases on the moon, bases on Mars. As a matter of fact, I've seen, and I've mentioned this a few times, people will probably get sick of hearing it, but I seen the most convincing video a guy did. He recorded through his telescope, and he was watching the moon, and you could see a section of the moon light up. And you see thousands of these, like, illuminated objects just start leaving the surface of the moon. And you got to wonder if there are bases and this kind of thing going on places like the moon and even Mars. I mean, Mars now, I believe it has a blue sky. I think that, there might even be life up there. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's as far as searching for life beyond Earth, Mars is the best candidate so far. As far as where the aliens might be hanging out, there was a SETI beamed out a coded message, if you would, from Arecibo, the dish down in Puerto Rico, that big 1,000-foot disc. They beamed a message out that was coded, and if you decoded it, it gave a description of our number system, the decimal system, that talked about the chemistry of life, what chemicals are involved in life. It gave a description of our DNA, gave a description of the typical human, their size, and it said, and it showed a little diagram where it indicated, if you want to find us, here's where we are. And the diagram had pulled the third planet from the sun out of line. So it's like, come to the third rock from the sun. That's where we are. And then below that, it showed a diagram of the dish, if you would, the Arecibo radio telescope. Well, that was 1974. Lo and behold, around 2002, I think it was, or 2000, a very similar design appeared in a field in England near a radio telescope, except it had some differences. It added silicon as one of the elements of life. It showed a little different DNA. It described a gray, if you would, short gray, gave the dimensions. And then where we said, if you want to find us, we're on the third rock from the sun. Well, they had pulled the third rock from the sun out, saying, here we are on Earth. We are also on Mars, and we are also on moons of Jupiter. So they're all over the place. I think hanging out on the backside of the moon would be a logical place to go if you wanted to be close but not be seen.
Right. So, and I've seen some pretty convincing photos and videos, and I know how this stuff could be doctored nowadays, but I've seen some pretty good stuff. It shows what looks like tubes on the moon, on the backside of the moon, and this came from, I believe it was China, had some kind of satellite going around the moon, and they captured pictures of this. Now, I don't know how true it is, but it looked pretty damn good to me.
Well,
So.
I lecture on this. My lecture is called The Science Behind Alien Encounters, and I go through this whole discussion, and I talk about searching for life on Mars, and I show a NASA photograph. I can't remember the number right now, but every now and then I go in and check it to make sure they haven't airbrushed it out. But this photograph was taken by one of the rovers, excuse me, that was on the surface back, I think, around 2005. You know, we had the Spirit and I forget what the other one was called, but they both had cameras, micro cameras, and NASA has on file pictures that these cameras took when they were parked. One of them, when you look at it, you say, well, that's a beach. And then if you enlarge some of the things on the beach, they look exactly like broken seashells. I mean, I can't imagine they're anything but seashells. And I'm saying, why isn't NASA jumping up and down and saying, look, here's evidence that there was life on Mars? But they aren't. Yeah. It's like, I think they know there's life there, but I don't think they want us to know it.
Yeah, and you know, I've got a little theory about that. I think there's a reason they don't want us to know, and I think it goes even further than the whole one world, new world order that some say that the aliens are behind. I don't believe that as much as I believe that, you know, I think that they don't want us to know because if we did know, we would probably learn more about where we came from and what our past really was, and I think that that's what they're trying to keep from us. I don't think they want us to know. I mean, for all we know, these civilization that could be on Mars could have been us a long time ago, left this planet. And right. They don't, you know, because there's a face on Mars, and I know some people dispute that. I believe it's a real monument up there. There's pyramids on Mars, and it's funny that the same stuff is found here on Earth. So there's a connection. Yeah.
Well, all the elements required for life appear to be on Mars. There's water, you know, there's in frozen form and apparently in liquid form. There's evidence that there was water flowing on the Mars. I show those photographs too, and they're all NASA photographs, so it's got to be true, right? But recently there was a gentleman, and I can't recall his name, but I don't know if any of your listeners happen to subscribe to Filer's Files. I highly recommend that they do. It's a weekly thing that comes through the email, and it's like a newsletter. And about 2 weeks ago, George Filer was talking about this gentleman who had been fired from NASA because he wouldn't kind of go along with what they wanted. And what he claims is that our astronauts who went to the moon discovered technology on the moon that wasn't human technology, but NASA wanted that covered up. And his job, by the way, he was in charge of the data and photos, and they wanted. He said that he knew for a fact that thousands and thousands of NASA photos are airbrushed to remove things that they don't want us to see.
Sure, we know that happens.
Yeah, so you know, it seems like we're being fed to what they want us to know, and what are we going to do, right?
Well, all we can do is keep researching this stuff, and like I said, I've had 5 sightings of my own.
Wow.
That I've seen UFOs, yeah, and a couple of them were just amazing. So I know, I can't prove it to everyone else, but I know that these things exist. So that impels me even more to look into this because I want to know, you know, what they are, where they're coming from, and what their plan is. What are they doing? Are they just watching us? Or, I mean, is it like a fish tank? You know, you put some fish in it, and then you just come over and watch it every day to see how it progresses. So.
Yeah. Well, you're fortunate. I came to a logical conclusion that there was other life out there years ago. And the natural progression for me, being an engineering type, was to, well, okay, there is life out there, so there must be some truth to these UFO stories. So they do exist. So how did they do what they do? And that kind of led me down that path. And it wasn't until 3 years ago that I actually saw one, and that was when I was in Cancun, and it was what I refer to as a Foo Fighter. It was one of those balls. And I don't know what type you saw, but this one was a ball that I was sitting, looking out over the Caribbean early in the morning. The sun hadn't come up. The sky was starting to get light. You could still see stars, and there were clouds rolling in off the Caribbean. And then all of a sudden, swooping over my head is this golden, it's kind of hard to describe, ball of light that swooped over and then curved up behind the cloud. And, my first reaction was it was a shooting star, but then I thought, wait a minute, I know what that is. That was a Foo Fighter. And that was a clincher. But I believed it before that.
Right, and I've always believed that we weren't alone, too. Even as a little kid, I used to come out in the backyard at night and kick back in a chair and look up at the sky, the night sky, and you see all that's up there. And I know it wasn't put there just to make our night sky look pretty. That's not why it's there. There's a lot more going on out there. There's a lot more life out there than most people would like to admit. But I believe that we're not alone. And, the sightings that I had, just a few of them, I'll go over quickly. One was if you remember the jacks, you bounce the ball, pick up the jacks. Well, this one looked like one of those jacks. It was glowing orange. Me and a couple of my children seen it together. And this thing was up in the sky, and it wasn't that far up, but it was up there a little bit. And the balls on the end of it actually separated from it, took off through the sky where you couldn't see them, and then they came back. And this all happened in seconds, and then the thing took off. So that was one that we've seen. Another one, I was just recently, my wife and I both seen it. We had just got through talking about UFOs and how they're spotted a lot in storms, electrical storms. We were having an electrical storm out here, a lot of lightning in the sky, and I went outside to throw some garbage out. And I looked up, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught this glowing object, and I looked up, and I'll tell you, I think I could have probably got 2 40-foot ladders and jumped off of the ladders and touched this thing. It was so close. And
wow.
They looked like 4 cigar-shaped objects. They were in formation, and they were, at first I thought maybe these were like meteorites coming through, but they weren't, because they went real slow as they went through. They weren't going fast at all. And they had like a white light coming out of the back of them. And the more I think about it, I wonder now if it was just one giant object that looked like 4 separates. Because they were together, and they floated through the sky like it was no one's business. And I was running out there, screaming and yelling, look. And, my wife come out and seen it, but we were the only two that have reported seeing it so far. I've had nobody else say, hey, I've seen that too. I don't know. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the thing that really amazes me is people who see these, and they know what they see, despite what they're told they saw. They know what they saw. And people who've contactees or abductees, people who've been really close to this stuff, how they can now know firsthand that there's this intelligent life out there, and then go about their daily life, as though nothing happened. I don't know how people can do that. I know I've seen a UFO, and I believe in UFOs, but yet I go about my daily life. We all have to earn a living. We all do that. It's amazing that we can kind of put that amazing thing aside and still function. That I don't know how people do that, but we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do. We go through every day, and for me, I don't know. I want proof. For me, I have proof for myself, but I'd like it to be proven. I'm one of those who would like to see one land in the middle of the street, and that's probably never going to happen. And as far as the government coming out and saying, yes, okay, the truth is we've lied to you for 60 years, we're not alone, that's probably never going to happen either. I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe they'll just come and land one day and it'll all be over. But I'm convinced that there is other life out there, and certainly closer to us than we probably know. I mean, probably some of Jupiter's moons, Mars. There's probably something going on the moon. I mean, and to some that'll sound crazy, but I don't think it's that crazy. I think it's very possible.
Well, as far as disclosure from our own government, you have to think about it. If you were president, would you go on public television and say, well, folks, I just went to Area 51 and I saw a UFO and they are for real, and there are living beings out there that have technology way beyond us. Would you do that? I wouldn't do that.
Well, no, I wouldn't do it because they'd probably tell me, if you do that, we're going to take care of you.
Oh yeah, well, that's another reason why you wouldn't do it. But I mean, would you want to be the president that presides over the crash of the stock market and everything else that would go wrong when you do that?
I would not want to be the president at all, to be honest with you. They could have that job.
Yeah. Then there's the issue of the aliens themselves. I don't know if I told this story the last time I was on, but I had just finished reading Dr. David Jacobs' book called The Threat. Now, he is a professor of history at Temple University, and in his book, that particular book, the very last paragraph, he discusses how he has this tremendous feeling of remorse and dread, I guess you might say. Tremendous feeling of dread, and that's it. It doesn't explain that. Well, a few days later, as luck would have it, I was at a UFO conference and I was at the luncheon, and I was sitting at a round table, and right next to me on my right was Bud Hopkins, and directly across the table was David Jacobs. So I had a chance to ask him. I said, "Why do you have such a feeling of dread?" And he said, "Well, history has shown that when a more advanced civilization interacts with a less advanced civilization, the less advanced civilization disappears." And of course, that would be us. And I think the aliens are wise enough to know that if they were to interact with us directly, it would be to our demise.
Well, that's quite possible, too, because you look back at Neanderthal, and as it said, we pretty much wiped them out.
Sure.
Yeah. So that would make sense. But at some point, you see so many of them, so many people, millions of people have sightings. And these things, I mean, one I've seen, it's like they play with you. They'll hide behind a cloud, come out, hide behind the cloud, come out. I mean, it's not like they're trying not to be seen, it seems. It's like they almost want you to see them and want you to look like you're crazy when you tell everybody about it. So you got to wonder, at some point, the truth has got to come out. It just has to.
How about the huge craft that's over a mile in size that drifted down Arizona in 1979, March 13th, 1979. It was known as the Phoenix Lights, but it was actually a huge craft that went all the way from Nevada, went down south along what I visualize as I-17. I'm in Arizona right now, so I'm familiar with it. All the way, and it violated the airspace at the Phoenix International Airport, I think about the 6th largest airport in the country. And then went on down to Tucson and into Mexico, and then came back. And thousands of people saw it.
You know what? It might have been a Toyota, and the gas pedal got stuck.
Well, it was big, whatever it was. And as you probably know, the governor, who at the time, tried to make light of the thing, and he was under a lot of pressure to answer, what was that thing? And so, he brings one of his staff members on stage in an alien costume and makes a big joke out of it. Well, that was by Simonton. Well, then years later, he's no longer governor, and he appears on the Larry King show in 2008, and he says what he really saw, that he saw a craft, a huge craft. And by the way, he was a military pilot, so he knew what a plane looked like. And he said this looked like nothing he had ever seen before. It defied all of his sensibilities. It was so huge.
That's right.
Well, so you would think that sighting, that mass sighting, would have done something, to change things as far as what our government says about these things.
Yeah, I know. Go figure. Art, we got to take. I'm sorry, I said Art. Dr. Robert. I was just I was just looking in the chat. We've got a chat member by the name of Art, and while I was reading, I was talking. Shame on me, but Dr. Robert, hang on with us for a moment. We got to take a short break here. And Dr. Robert E. Farrell, my guest. Robert, this mass sighting in Arizona, I think, I asked the same question. Why was something like that just basically talked about briefly, forgotten about, and, never did it go any further? Something like that, and you're right. This guy did, at first, he had the alien costume, somebody in an alien costume, and he made fun of it, but then later came out and said that, yes, he did see it. It was real. So, you got to wonder, how do things like this just get thrown away and no more attention's brought to it?
I don't know. It could be the major media is being controlled to some extent as to what they cover and what they don't cover and what they should downplay. Because to me, it's such an important thing. It's amazing that it isn't talked up more. Dr. Lynn Katai, who is a heart doctor, she and her husband are involved in a heart clinic here in Phoenix. She was so moved by the event that she wrote a book about it. She did research on the subject, and in her book, she talks about how a year before the event, she would go out on her balcony, and these orange glowing balls would approach her house, and almost as though they were communicating with her. And so when the event did happen, she was really moved. But because she was a medical doctor and had a career to think of, she didn't really come out right away. She kind of stayed in the closet. But she did a lot of research and became convinced what it was. And she wrote the book. And not only that, she produced a DVD, a movie about it, and is now frequently seen on a lot of UFO conferences as a speaker. But she's quite outspoken, and she did a great job of documenting that particular event.
I see. So, and no doubt that the mainstream media is under control. I have absolutely no doubt about that at all. They pretty much get put on their teleprompters what they're going to tell everybody, and they're to stick to it. And when they don't, that's just like Glenn Beck. I think he went a little too far, so they got rid of him. And that Judge Napalo, or whatever his name was, another one who I think went just a little too far, so they got rid of him. And that's what happens. Even Jesse Ventura said that he signed a contract with MSN, I don't know, one of those news outlets, and what they did was decided they weren't going to put him on, but they paid him his contract. So therefore, for that 3 years that he was under contract, he wasn't allowed to come out and speak about anything because he was under contract. And that's what they do. They get these people under their spell and they run them, basically. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. I think it was around 2010 when 6 Air Force officers appeared before the national press in Washington, D.C.
That's my friend the train going by, and I can't mute it because if I do, no one will hear you.
Anyway, these are Air Force officers, and I think there was one enlisted man that appeared at the National Press Conference in Washington, D.C., where supposedly representatives from the major presses, like NBC and all those guys, CNN, would be there. And they told their story about how they had experienced having their missiles shut down in these silos. Now, this is a matter of national security, and you would think that that would have made front-page news. But I don't know of anyone who acknowledges ever reading about that.
That's right.
It was just not covered,
And there's a lot of things just like that aren't covered. Or they'll be covered briefly, and then you go back to find them in archives, and all of a sudden the archives are missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary. It really is.
It really is. So tell me this. Where do you think we're headed right now as a society, as a world? I mean, where do you think we're heading? I mean, we get so much bad news day in, day out, and there's enough of it to go around. And then we hear about these UFOs shutting down nuclear missile silos and things like that, but yet things like Fukushima happen, and you're thinking, well, if they're going to worry that much to shut this down or that down, why didn't they stop Fukushima? So that's why, I hear people say, well, there's the Starship is up above and it's there to save us, and I'm thinking, well, they're sleeping then, because we could have used saving a long time ago.
Well, that's a good point. Why don't they kind of intercede on some of these natural, I guess you could call it a natural disaster, a man-made natural disaster.
Yeah.
Maybe they're more concerned about the nuclear exchange possibilities that really could obliterate life on this planet. Although we don't know yet what the outcome of Fukushima is going to be, it might still obliterate all life as we know it.
Yeah, it very well could. And,
we don't know the end of that story.
No, and then you look at all the nuclear facilities that we have global. Earthquakes or any kinds of natural disasters can cause 2, 3, 4, 5 more of those things to do the same exact thing. A solar flare from the sun, an EMP, and we could be in a whole lot of trouble. So it's like we're designed to destruct ourselves, to destroy ourselves.
That's right. It was kind of interesting. I don't know if you remember 3 Mile Island, that event that occurred in Hershey, Pennsylvania. It was almost ironic. My wife and I went out to see the China Syndrome. I don't know if you know about that movie. And in that movie, it dealt with this power plant that had experienced a meltdown. We come home from that, turn on the news, and they're talking about the 3 Mile Island and the possibility of a meltdown.
Yeah.
It was too much of a coincidence for me to take.
Yeah, and I'm one of those that I don't believe too much in that whole coincidence thing. It's just there's too many coincidences for them to be coincidences, and so I guess that leads me. Where do you think we head? Where do you think the next 5 years takes us here on this starship called Earth?
Well, I am concerned. I really do wish that we would change our form of government a little bit. Even if all we did is if everyone just never voted for an incumbent, so we would get to a single term situation as step one. But I really think if we don't have some kind of a constitutional amendment to correct this election process, it's getting out of hand. Too much money's involved. And these big money people are buying our government. That's the way I see it. And it's not going to get any better unless we the people, somehow make dramatic changes to that process.
Oh, I agree with you. The system we have in place right now is being manipulated horribly. It's now with these electronic voting deals that they've got as well. And I actually had the one guy at the voting station said, oh, no, these can't be tampered with. It's like, come on. What do you think, I was born yesterday? You could have anything inside of that thing. You could already have my answers in there. And whatever I press on that screen could not matter one bit. So, don't tell me they can't be tampered with, because, yes, they can.
Well, you realize this is 2012, right? And December is approaching.
Yes, yeah. So what do you think about December 21st, 2012?
Well, you know what I think? You remember Y2K?
Yes, I do.
Much to do about nothing? I think that's what we're going to find out. Now, it was interesting because when I was down in Cancun, and I go down there every year, I had some of my books with me, and I was walking down the beach, stopping at each of the hotels, to deposit some books for their guests to read. And I went into the lobby of one of the hotels to where they keep their library, and there was this young Mayan gentleman who was running the thing, and he saw the cover of my book, which, if you've seen it, you know there's a picture of the gray aliens on the cover.
Yeah.
And before I even got to his desk, he started smiling. He says, "I know who those are." He knew who they were. But he told me a story about when he was in the 5th grade. This is down in Mexico now. He was on a bus with his classmates. They were on a field trip. And all of a sudden, he said, the bus stopped, the engine stopped, and he noticed the hand on his clock, on his watch, was going backwards on his wristwatch. He said the professor, he called him professor, told everyone to get off the bus. So he said we all got off the bus, and he said he looked across the street, and there was this most beautiful craft that he had ever seen just floating up there. And then all of a sudden it zoomed away, leaving a pink cloud behind it, which I had never heard that before. But later I was talking with him. I said, well, this was like 3 years ago. I said, well, now, what do the Mayans think is going to happen in 2012? He said, well, the Mayans believe that in 2012 we're going to have one world government and one world religion. Well, frankly, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we have enough time for that.
Yeah.
That's my feeling. So I don't think anything's going to happen. Like I say, I think it'll be much ado about nothing. Ironically, I will be in Cancun on December 21st, so I'm hoping nothing happens.
Well, I'll be on the air that night, and I'm actually going to invite some of my past guests to join me, and you're welcome to join me that night, too, if you like. I'm going to have on Dr. Jason Rand, thinking about getting Ann Eller, maybe a few of the others on for that night, because I don't believe December 21st, 2012 is going to be no doomsday scenario either. I know a lot of people, if anything, we've heard about this new consciousness and this and that. Well, I would say if we're really supposed to reach a new consciousness in 2012, then we wouldn't be talking about Obama another 4 years. That's for one. And for another, maybe it's the year that we all wake up. I don't know. There's a lot of ifs, but I don't think I definitely am not planning on the end of the world or anything like that, as some people have suggested.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'll wake up the next day and I won't notice that anything has changed.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. So let's get into abductions a little bit.
Okay.
What do you think about abductions? What do you think's going on there?
Well, actually, what I put in my book is what I think. I think that they're doing abductions for a purpose. Now, it seems that a lot of people are being abducted repeatedly throughout their life, from the time they're just a young child until present day. Under regression, they discover that they've been abducted many times. And not only that, their mother was abducted and their grandmother was abducted. And scarier yet, their kids are starting to get abducted. It runs in the family type of thing.
Yeah.
And again, I think it goes back to the idea of the hybrids. These people that are being abducted frequently talk about being educated, being shown scary films that would indicate that we're going to have some major disasters. And they seem to be educated and learn, and they're taught to do things. So the only thing I could conclude, that's, I thought hard about this because I'm writing this book, so what am I going to say? Well, that's when I came to the conclusion that this whole thing serves a purpose, that these abductions and the hybrid thing is serving a purpose, because it's actually happening. I believe what Dr. Jacobs says about it, and I believe what the late Dr. Mack says. I believe that's all facts, and so it's the reality. So what's happening? Well, I think it's for our good. It has something to do with what's going to happen to us in the future for our own benefit. And that's all, that's as much as I can say. And that's why I in my book I called it the New World Order, that they were going to be used to usher in the New World Order. And in other words, a form of government that unifies the world in a simpler way, but doesn't take away our freedoms or anything. It still allows us as humans to control our destiny. But to try and cure some of the problems that we see, like this recent election we just had. That that's my take on it. Who knows?
Right. I want to see everybody come together and be peaceful, but I still want to see borders. I still want United States borders. I want the borders protected. I want us to be sovereign, and I want us to be a constitutional republic. And I want honest leaders. And this is all wants and things that I don't think we're going to have. I mean, as long as there's human interaction, and as long as there's corporations involved, they're really running the show. The bankers and the corporations are running everything. And until that stuff is cut out, and these so-called elected leaders are held accountable, it's just going to continue to go on. They need to be held accountable. Everybody who said yay to that NDAA bill, each and every one of them should be tried for treason. Obama, in my opinion, for bombing Libya and not going to Congress but going to the UN for that, that's treason. I think that it's just we've gone down the wrong road, and there's too many people. You give them a free phone. I saw one video. A woman says, "I'm voting for Obama because I got my free phone. Obama gave me a free phone," and I'm thinking, really? Well, if that's the case, then all they really have to do is offer a few luxuries like a phone, some video games, some free food, and they can lead all the sheeple right to the FEMA camps and lock them up, and there wouldn't be no fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I agree. We can't keep going the way we've been going. But then again, I suppose we've been saying that for decades, and nothing gets changed. It gets worse. So yeah. I'm hoping things change. I'm looking at Canada now. That's one option, is Canada to jump ship, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And and I've been telling my Canadian friends too. Whatever happens here in the United States will certainly affect Canada as well, and Mexico. And we've heard about them trying to bring this northern alliance together, Mexico, Canada, and the United States all as one. And again, in the perfect world, that would be nice, but I don't think it would be as pleasant as some think it would. I think we'd have a lot of issues to deal with, even more than we have now. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I don't like where we are right now. I don't like the way the future looks right now. But who knows? Maybe we'll all get a surprise. Maybe God himself will intervene. Who knows? But yeah. Well, we're up for another break, Doctor. So hang on with me.
It is to try and make the general public aware of this whole phenomena, because the press certainly isn't doing that. But because I am concerned that if there is the day when, let's say, a White House incident occurs where a UFO lands on the lawn or something, I don't want people to run off and panic. I want them to realize that it is a reality, and so my lecture and everything is a nuts and bolts lecture. I try to explain how these things work by gravitational propulsion. I explain how that's possible and the advantages of it, because a lot of the things that people see them doing, and like you reported your own sighting, they're pretty amazing. It's almost magical. And but I feel that it can all be explained if you dig into it. They're not violating our laws of physics. They just understand them better and know how to manipulate them better. And to me, the centerpiece is the gravitational propulsion. It can explain so many things.
I was going to say, explain that just a little bit for everybody, how they would be doing that.
Well, I believe they're manipulating electromagnetic fields to create gravitational fields, and that is theoretically possible. Einstein showed that in his general theory of relativity. In fact, that's the interaction between electromagnetic fields and gravitational fields was what led him to predict that a beam of light would be bent when it passed by the rim of the sun during a solar eclipse. So if indeed gravitational fields can affect electromagnetic fields, then my feeling is the reverse is also possible, that you can somehow manipulate electromagnetic fields to produce a gravitational field. And so that's in theory, you can do that. Not only in theory, but it's being done in the laboratory. I think last time I talked about some of the research that Dr. Eugene Podletnov is doing in Finland, where he is actually producing gravitational pulses with one of his machines that he put together. And he's learning some pretty interesting things about the nature of gravity. For instance, he learned that the gravitational pulse, he clocks it at 64 times the speed of light. And he's able to take this pulse of gravity wave, which I think is a negative wave, because when he strikes an object with it, like a metal plate with a very intense field, he can actually bend the plate or even punch holes in it. So he can do some amazing things with it, but what's even more amazing is this force that he's able to exert on objects does not create a reaction on his machine. So, we grow up in learning that there's equal and opposite reaction to a force. Okay, that's a kind of a tenet of physics. Well, for some reason, it doesn't seem to apply here with the gravity field. And some other things that we might find out. One of my colleagues pointed out that if you plugged in a negative gravitational field into Einstein's field equations, that suddenly you discover that the speed of light is increased. So maybe if you're propelling your craft with a negative field, you can travel faster than what we think the speed of light is. There's all kinds of advantages. With the gravitational field propulsion, you can accelerate at any rate you want, 100 Gs, 1,000 Gs, you name it. You can get to very high speeds very quickly. If we could just build a craft that could be powered by a gravitational field, and we could accelerate at 100 Gs, we could reach the moon in 20 minutes. We could reach Mars in 12 hours. It changes everything.
Yeah, I had a guest on who claimed, John Searle, you've probably heard of him, who claims that this can be done. He says that he's done it.
Well, yeah, it is being done. I just mentioned Podletnov is doing it in the lab. Also, some experiments have been done that shows that the beam of light actually does create a gravitational field. And they've measured the effect where they shoot a laser beam past a mass that's suspended, in a controlled environment, and the mass is drawn toward the beam of light. So that just confirms that there is this interaction between electromagnetic and gravitational fields. And we just need to delve into it a little deeper. And frankly, I guess I'm surprised. I would be surprised if I found out that the NASA and the Air Force haven't already done the same research and found the same thing. Maybe
I wouldn't doubt if. Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't doubt if they're using it. As a matter of fact, I've even speculated that it could be possible that some of the abductions nowadays could actually be our own government for whatever reason.
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to think of her name. She's an abductee. She's written a book, Aliens in My Closet, I think was the title of it. The name will come. Her name will come to me. But she was suffering some anguish and some psychological problems that she just, couldn't understand why she was having these problems. And she finally found a hypnotist who was familiar with abductions and regressed her, and she discovered that she had indeed been abducted. And during one incident, she was aboard a UFO that was brought down. It was crashed deliberately by our government off of on a beach off of Florida, and she was rescued by the military from that craft. And she said that ever since that time, most of her abductions she felt were done by the military, who kind of would drug her and disguise themselves as though they were grays or aliens in kind of a feeble type of disguise, she thought. But it's clearly they were not aliens. And she said that the abductions by the military were far worse than any abductions that she had by aliens.
Oh, I'm sure that they would be. And,
Yeah.
I'm convinced that there's a secret space program. I've interviewed Andrew Basiago, and I know some people say he's off his rocker or whatever, but, the man's a lawyer. He's an attorney. He's an intelligent human being, and, I mean, what would you have to gain discrediting yourself? He says that he was in a Project Pegasus, in which they were using advanced technologies for teleportation and other things. So, people have come out and talked about this, and I say this, any technology that's given to us today, the military's had it for 20 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at the planes they're flying today, and you know that they've got something that we don't know about that can do even more.
Yeah.
And they might even be using gravitational propulsion. I wouldn't be a bit surprised.
And something else I'm a little concerned with. You hear about this, the government's, the New World Order's last card, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them. Their last card would be a false flag alien invasion. And with the technology they have, what if they did do something like that,
Yeah.
And with this going around and people thinking this way, what would happen if real aliens actually did land and try to make contact with us? Everybody would think it's the government; they're up to it, and they'd be going after them. So we can't win either way, can we?
That's true. Well, maybe when the driver of the craft steps out of the craft and it looks kind of strange, maybe they'd realize that really was an alien.
Yeah, well, you've never lived in Mansfield, Pennsylvania, huh?
No.
Yeah, because you see strange people every day.
Yeah.
But so we've got about 10 minutes to go here with you, Robert. So whatever you'd like to get out, any information you'd like to get out in the next 10 minutes, please do. And I'd also like to say thank you so much for being a guest on Late Night in the Midlands tonight. And, it's always fun talking with you.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I appreciate being invited to talk. I just gave a lecture today called How the Universe Began Without a Big Bang. And it's a new lecture I'm developing, and it's based on a theory of a friend of mine. That his theory kind of competes against the Big Bang theory, and I like his theory much better. And I can't go into it in depth right in 10 minutes. I couldn't cover it. But let me just say that I don't believe in the Big Bang theory, and it's full of holes, actually. And this theory that Bobby McGee has, who happens to be a friend of mine. In fact, we're co-authoring a book on that subject, which will come out hopefully within a year. And in his theory, the universe did not start from a singularity and in a form of a Big Bang. It actually began in the primordial universe. It was already in existence, matter, in the form of positroniums, which is the simplest atom you can imagine. It's an electron and a positron, and they're orbiting a common center, and they're locked in. It's a three-dimensional array, if you would, that extends out to infinity. And at these lattice points, we have these positronium atoms in a very stable environment. They're all interacting and in phase. And for those of you that understand what entropy is, this would be probably the lowest entropy level that the universe could have. And from that point on, once a chain reaction starts, the entropy, of course, increases. And that's one of the theory of thermodynamics, is that entropy always increases. But anyway, according to his theory, then you had this matrix, and at some point, about 20 billion years ago or so, you could say that it was the finger of God, but something disturbed one of those positronium atoms, and it self-annihilated, releasing 2 gamma rays, which went out and struck 2 other positroniums and released 4 gamma rays, and so forth. So it began a chain reaction that's continuing today in this huge deflagration wavefront, if you would, that's moving out into the infinite universe, and behind this wave, the photons that are created during this annihilation eventually convert back into matter and form subatomic particles and elements like hydrogen and so forth, and these agglomerate into dust and other things, which further agglomerate into stars and galaxies and galactic clusters. And as this process occurs behind this deflagration front, which is moving at the speed of light, this linear momentum of all these subatomic particles that are created is gradually converted into angular momentum due to the turbulence that occurs behind this deflagration wave as these particles kind of interact, begin spinning, and like galaxies are spinning and so forth. That is all angular momentum that was converted from the linear momentum. So his theory then predicts that as you step away from the deflagration front back toward the beginning of time, you would see that things are slowing down, whereas the Big Bang Theory says that as you look further out into space, things are speeding up. And in reality, it's just the opposite. They're slowing down as they get closer into us because we have to be closer to the initiation point. And but because the Big Bang Theory says that they're speeding up, now they have to figure out, well, now what's causing it to speed up? You need some kind of a force, some kind of an energy, and so now they're looking for this thing called dark energy. They're never going to find it. There is a thing called dark matter. I'm pretty convinced of that. Don't know what it is, but there is dark matter, and that fits into Bobby's theory just as well as it fits into the Big Bang Theory. But so there are a lot of things in his theory that make sense. His theory does not violate any basic laws of physics. It does not require the universe to begin at a singularity. It's just as easy for me to believe that things are already there, that matter was already in existence. It's easier for me to believe that than to think that everything started from a singularity. I just can't fathom that.
Do you think that, it'll get so big and then collapse on itself?
Well, that is a question. The deflagration wave, of course, is continuing at the speed of light, and it will continue forever up to infinity. But things are slowing down behind it, and so that point has been raised. Well, if you travel back to where it's all began, where things have slowed down to just about nothing, are those things going to begin to collapse, and into maybe you could call it a singularity? That's possible that they could collapse into this single point. But probably before they get to that singularity, they would start interacting and maybe create an explosion or something, create another star, create a black hole, create something.
Right. I have one more question for you, and this comes from the chat. Do you believe there's a Planet X, Nibiru, or any of those in our solar system?
I believe there could be. The Sumerians believe that this Planet X, which they called Nibiru, entered our solar system, wandered into our solar system 4 billion years ago, which was like a 500 million years after our solar system began. So everything was still plastic and hot and all that. And I refer to Nibiru as a planetoid, and I explain what a planetoid is. A planetoid, normally when gas and dust is collapsing due to a gravitational field, the pressure and temperature will build as this material is collapsing. Eventually, will form a star. If there's enough material to get high enough pressure and temperature, it will begin to a fusion process and become a star. And a lot of times, this gas and dust has a rotation effect in it. It has some angular momentum, and so around the star then will be the remaining gas and dust that didn't go into the star itself, and out of that will create planets. So you'll have a star with planets, and that's what happened with our solar system. But astronomers believe that if that mass that we started off with happens to be less than 13 times the mass of Jupiter, that there won't be enough pressure and temperature formed when it collapses to start a fusion reaction. So it will become what you could call a failed star or a brown dwarf. I call it a planetoid. And the gas and dust that's spinning around it then would form moons. So you could have a planetoid with moons wandering around until it gets captured by a star, such as our sun. Now, someday we'll be able to detect some of these planetoids around other stars, because we'll notice one thing, that they're orbiting the star out of the ecliptic plane where all the other planets are. And we'll also notice, so it'll be at some angle. Now, supposedly Nibiru is at about a 30-degree angle. We will also notice that there's a 50-50 chance that it's going backwards, retrograde, from all the other planets. And supposedly Nibiru is doing that. It will probably form an elongated orbit. Now, Nibiru has a period of 3,600 years, and I did a calculation because apparently its closest approach to the sun was 4 astronomical units, which is where the asteroid belt is. And so if you can visualize in your mind this planet going around, you speed the process up, you could see that when it's way out there, and it probably goes out as far as, I'm trying to think, maybe 40 times as far as Pluto. So it's not quite far. But you can imagine it's moving really slow out there. And then eventually it comes in and it speeds up as it's approaching the sun, and it whips around the sun and then goes back out again. So it might spend, I don't know, 100 years inside the orbit of, I'm just guessing at that number, but inside the orbit of Pluto. So it's a relatively short time. But for the rest of the 3,000 some odd years, it's out beyond Pluto, drifting along, and so it's possible that we don't detect it yet. And so it might well be out there. And some people have tried to look at events that have occurred on Earth, like the birth of Christ and things, as occurring during one of Nibiru's close approaches. So I don't know if that answers your question. I guess my answer is yes, I believe it's certainly possible. I happen to believe it seems like the Sumerians had a good understanding of our solar system. Their understanding of the solar system actually explains things better than what our current astronomers are able to explain. For instance, why do we have so much water on our planet? If you follow what the Sumerians believed, that the Nibiru crashed into Tiamat, which was a large planet that existed in the asteroid belt, and half of that planet became the asteroid belt, and the other half was thrown down into an orbit where the Earth is today, and that's us. It would answer the question of why we have so much water on our planet, because we are termed a rocky planet. Our position relative to the sun says that we shouldn't have as much water as we have. And there's been various theories proposed. Well, was snowballs raining from space or whatever? But none of those have panned out. On the other hand, if we actually were originally formed out in the asteroid belt, as the Sumerians believed we were, we would have more water ice. And in fact, Ceres, which is one of the largest asteroids out there, is 25% water ice. So everything that Sitchin reported that the Sumerians believe, to me, has been verified after Sitchin wrote the book. His 12th planet book I'm talking about.
You're right. See, and I'm with you. I think that it's very possible. I've had no solid evidence. However, there is quite a bit out there that would point towards it. And then there's quite a few debunkers that really make a lot of sense, too, on all this. So it's really hard to tell. I guess we'll know at some point. But, I know some people who swear on their lives that it's there and it's going to be coming by and it's causing problems that we're having on Earth now. And that could be possible. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, given the secrecy of of NASA and these other people, maybe they've detected it, but they aren't telling us. You never know.
Yeah, and that's just it. If they detect it, they're not going to tell us. And at the same time, I could understand both sides of the coin. Sure, we want to know, but at the same time, if they did get on a national broadcast right now and announced it, it would be total chaos. So, you know, it's one of those situations where, again, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
But, all right, well, Doctor, please give out the website one more time and where they can get the books. And I want to thank you again for being a guest on Late Night in the Midlands. Always a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure being on. If they go to www.alienlog.com, they'll find in there a lot of information about me, my lectures, and they'll also see a tab that they can click on and how to purchase the book. And that page, if they clicked on Amazon, for instance, it would take them directly into Amazon, and there's the book staring them in the face. Or they could go to Barnes & Noble, and they could either get e-books or paper books from any of those organizations.
Okay. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us, and keep up the great work, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again really soon.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, that's Dr. Robert E. Farrell, and we've got him linked up over on Late Night.
Scientists, and my lead character actually is a young woman in her 30s who's a linguist, and she's world renowned for her ability to translate anything that's written. For her, it's intuitive. She doesn't know herself how she does it sometimes, but she's tapped for the project and agrees to go along, and then she's taken to a secret underground base out in Nevada where she's paired with a young astrophysicist who has a passion for UFOs. As a matter of fact, he works for a company called Gravidyne, located near Boston, and where they're doing research to try and create gravitational propulsion. But he has a passion for UFOs and a lot of knowledge. So he's brought in to the team. Again, he doesn't realize where he's been taken. Eventually they figure out that they're out in Area 51. But anyway, his part of the team is to try is to do a technical interpretation of whatever Wendy, the linguist, happens to discover. So in the first book, this team is sequestered in this underground base in Nevada, and my characters are given a tour of the base where they see some broken UFOs and some alien bodies. And this is all important for Wendy, the linguist, to try and get a feel for the writing that she's going to encounter and basically, you know, their lifestyle and whatever. They actually climb aboard one of the broken UFOs, and she gets a chance to see what it looks like and some of the writings that are on the control panel. And but in the story, she eventually gets the device activated, and through serendipity. I don't want to spoil the story, but she sort of accidentally gets it activated, and so she actually accomplishes her mission of activating the device, and through another method, which I don't want to get into, she does learn what the aliens are up to, and so they're just about to use this device to try and tap into the mainframe, if you would, of the aliens, and maybe suck out some of their technology. When lo and behold, the artifact is stolen. And so at the end of the first book, there's a chase scene into the desert, and they eventually recover the device, and they're ready to head back to the base and resume the project. And then the second book, Alien Log 2, picks up right there in the desert, and they head back to the base.
Come right out and tell them the truth. Some people can't handle it. And, you know, and I wouldn't say UFOs and UFO technology is really new age either. I mean, this is something that goes back since the beginning of time.
Yes, before we were here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Alien Log, and maybe as you go through some of it, maybe you could tell us the true end of it and what you found in your research.
Well, the Alien Log was the title of the first book of the series called Alien Log, and I chose an artifact. It was fictitious, but I chose to wrap my story around an alien artifact. And so the story goes that during right after the UFO crash in Kingman, Arizona, back in May of 1953, there was a captain who was overseeing the crash, and he discovered this artifact next to the craft. Now that's fiction, and he didn't know what the artifact was. Today you might have called it a Palm Pilot or something like that, but back in '53 they didn't have such things. So he thought it was either some kind of a communicating device or perhaps an electronic version of the log of the ship, which is where the title Alien Log came from. Well, he hides it on his person because he feels it's more important than the craft itself. So he doesn't want to throw it on the pile and send it back to some secret base. He keeps it. And then we jump ahead to present time, and he is a retired general. He's dying of cancer, and of course he's been following the UFO, seeing all of his life. So he's becoming alarmed because people who have been abducted under hypnosis reveal that the aliens had said that they're about to make their presence known, and it would be in their lifetime. And these people, a lot of them have gray hair, so it appeared to be something that was going to be imminent. And so the general now, he's the general, is very alarmed about this, so he takes the artifact to the President of the United States and gives it up to the President, who is equally alarmed and sees this as possibly a threat not only to our national security, but to all of humanity. So the President commissions a colonel to put together a team of scientists to try and get the device activated and translated to find out what's going on and maybe sort of head them off at the pass, so to speak. So in my story, there are basically three characters. There's the colonel in charge of the scientific team, and then there are two of life in general. So diversity is important. I think they realize that. So I think they take their stance is that they stand back. You know, they just let us develop, and hopefully we don't destroy ourselves. And because there are probably thousands of alien species that kind of wander by from time to time, maybe take a look-see. The rule is go ahead and look, but don't interact. Just stand back. Now, supposedly in Dulce Base, there have been, since probably World War II, we have been, the military, a faction of the military anyway, has been working with the aliens in exchange for their technology, allowing them to kind of do some of their own research in the form of genetics manipulation. And in my story, which of course is fiction, my characters are going to go in and try and halt some of the things that are being done that have gotten out of hand now, as far as what they're doing to humans.
Right, and if you could explain to everybody why you made them fiction, because wasn't it because you said that if you put the truth out there, people are less likely to pick it up? Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I have felt since I retired, I felt compelled that my job now is to try and educate the masses, so to speak. And a lot of the audience that I'm going after are people who would not go into the New Age section of Barnes & Noble, for instance, but they would pick up a science fiction book. So I am trying to educate them in an entertaining way, a non-threatening way, and a way that they wouldn't be ashamed to have a book laying on the table that talks about Alien Log, the science fiction book. But they may not want to show people the fact that they've got a book that says this is how UFOs work or whatever.
Right.
So I think that science fiction is a better way to educate the people. With maybe they don't even realize they're being educated as they're reading my books, but I think they are. But it's entertaining, so they're going to read it.
And that's the best way to educate some. Sometimes I'll do it through these funny little songs that I'll make up and stuff and put them out there, because some people are more apt to grab a hold of that and learn rather than hear you. I'm here on Skype. Dr. Robert E. Farrell received his Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Ohio State University, his MBA from Western New England College, and his Doctor of Engineering from the University of Massachusetts. For nearly 20 years, Dr. Farrell worked in his plastics industry, designing industrial machines for which he holds 6 patents. 16 years ago, Dr. Farrell gave up his position as vice president to become a professor at Penn State University, where he helped start a plastics engineering technology program. Today, that program is recognized as one of the best in the country. He recently retired from Penn State University as associate professor. For most of his life, Dr. Farrell has been interested in ufology. Over 10 years ago, he began doing serious research for his novel, Alien Log. His book is unique in that it offers readers a nuts and bolts approach encompassing many aspects of ufology. And as I said, I've got to get him here on Skype. So give me a moment to do that. Let's see. What? Oh, okay. Autumn's whispering to me here. Hold on a second. And that would be it. Okay, I got it. So let's add him to... No, not that button. This button. Oh, all right. Working on it now, folks. Robert, is that you?
Oh, that's me.
Hello,
can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir, I can. Welcome back to Late Night in the Midlands.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you back. So what's new? What you been working on?
Well, I'm still working on my 3rd novel, the Alien Log series. It deals with the underground Dulce base, which you may be familiar with.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, you've been researching that. This goes right into what I was just talking about, kind of. We've got some out there who are claiming that's a reptilian base, alien base. What do we know about this this underground base?
Well, I've heard that. That there are reptilians down there. There are grays, different types of grays. But I guess I really am not sure. I'm still working on that part.
I see. Okay. Well, fair enough. But some say that it's definite, and, I would actually like to see some proof of that. I don't doubt that aliens are visiting us. I don't doubt that they're here with us. But when I hear about these shapeshifters and these reptilians, and, I would wonder if they really had an agenda and they wanted to take over the world, why wouldn't they just do it? Why play games with politics and all that stuff? Why not just come and wipe us out? Because they could, right?
They could. I'm sure they have the technology to do that. And my conclusion is that there is a race of aliens here that are basically protectors or overseers, guardian angels, whatever you want to call them. And that I think there must be some sort of galactic federation rules in play here that prohibit other groups from kind of taking over.
I see. Well,
yeah.
I guess that does make some sense. And, I know there's enough evidence. I have no doubt that aliens, ETs, whatever you want to call them, they exist. I've seen UFOs myself, so I know those exist.
Right.
But what they're doing, that's the big question, I guess.
Well, you like to think that they are spiritually advanced as much as they are technologically advanced, and also that they're wise. And if they are wise, I think they realize the importance of diversity, which is maybe why there is this so-called galactic rule that says that you can look but don't touch. In other words, if you were an anthropologist and you were going to study a group of the natives in the jungle, you don't interact with them because you would contaminate their society, basically. And I think that may be the case, that they're standing back, letting us develop on our own, because we are a species of our own, and because it is important to have diversity throughout the universe. If all life were grays, simply grays or whatever alien form there is, if it was all like that, that would be very dangerous for the survival